Self-defense. It's a word that we hear used all the time in today's society. And although you may know the meaning of it, many people do not know the morality behind it, nor the Catholic Church's teachings of it. While the Catholic Church condemns the killings of unarmed, innocent civilians, it justifies self-defense and lethal force in self-defense situations by saying that the intended action is the preservation of one's life, and that the killing of the aggressor is an unintended byproduct of trying to preserve one's life. The Catechism goes on to say that sometimes using lethal force in self-defense situations is necessary and sometimes required in order to preserve the common good. Because this moral line comes from the Vatican, you're probably wondering how it can be applied into your own life. In order to illustrate this moral line, we devised 4 real-world applications and scenarios in which lethal force is used in the name of self-defense. While several of these are moral according to the Catholic line, several of these are also not moral according to the Catholic line. As we go through, we will determine whether or not they are moral according to the Catholic line or whether or not they are immoral. For our first scenario, we have an armed perpetrator with the intention of breaking and entering into some innocent person's house with a weapon and onto their property. While his initial intention may not be to kill somebody inside, he is carrying around a loaded weapon and putting others in danger, especially an innocent civilian that may or may not be inside. Is this act of self-defense moral or immoral according to the Catholic line? I'll give you a few seconds to think it over. It's obviously moral, of course. While the perpetrator's intent may not have been to kill the person inside, they are still carrying around a loaded weapon and endangering the life of the person inside. This person felt their life was in danger, and so they acted. Their intention wasn't to kill the perpetrator, but rather to preserve their own life. They did what was required to preserve the common good, and therefore that is why this scenario of self-defense is moral. For our second scenario, an unarmed man is trying to break into an innocent man's car, likely to steal goods or steal the car itself. This is obviously illegal and goes against the Catholic Church's teachings of the Ten Commandments. However, when the owner of the car comes out to see this unarmed man breaking into his car, he acts impulsively in self-defense. Is his use of self-defense moral according to the Catholic Church?
Whoa!
While the car thief was obviously violating the Ten Commandments and breaking the law, was it moral according to the Catholic Church for the car owner to shoot the unarmed car thief? Think about this for a little bit. To put it simply, no, it was immoral. Yes, the car thief was trying to break into his car and likely steal his goods. However, he was unarmed, and the life of the car owner was not threatened. Even if the car thief was violating the Ten Commandments and a bunch of other laws, the intention of the car owner was not to preserve his own life, but rather to kill the car thief itself. That is why this scenario is immoral according to the moral Catholic line. Our third scenario is a little bit more relatable. Here we have 2 kids tossing a football in the backyard. One of these throws goes over the other kid's head and into the neighbor's yard. One kid works up the courage to go into the neighbor's yard and get the football for himself. What happens next?
Oh shoot! I gotta get the ball now. Got it! Hey, get off my property!
Was this use of self-defense moral or immoral according to the Catholic line? Think about it for a second. It is actually immoral according to the Catholic line. While someone is intruding on somebody else's property, similarly to the first scenario, in this case, the person that is intruding is unarmed and seems to pose no threat to the person who owns the property. At no point was the property owner's life in danger, yet he still decided to use lethal force against the intruder. At no point was his intention to save his own life and preserve his own life, but it was always to kill the intruder himself. That is why this scenario of self-defense is immoral according to the Catholic moral line. For our last scenario, we have an armed robber putting an unarmed civilian at gunpoint, obviously putting his life in danger. This armed robber is eventually apprehended by a man, an armed man. As you watch, try and decide if this act of self-defense is moral or immoral according to the Catholic Church, and if the man who apprehended this robber did the right thing or the wrong thing.
Hey, give me your money. Give me all your money. Don't hurt me. Get on the ground. Get on the ground. Where?
Hey, drop the gun!
You're a hero.
Now that you have seen the scene play out, think to yourself, according to the Catholic Church, would this scenario and this use of self-defense be considered moral or immoral? This case would be considered moral. Although the man who ultimately apprehended the robber was not initially at risk of being killed, when he asked the robber to put the gun down, the robber pointed the gun at him, therefore putting the apprehender's life in danger. The apprehender then used lethal force against the robber in order to preserve his own life, with no intention of killing him whatsoever, as it is merely a byproduct according to the Catholic line.